Hello, everybody. Welcome. Another edition, episode 80 of the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast. I had to be reminded of that pregame show here. Thanks for being with us today. My name is Jim. As always, joining me is professional evaluator, successful business owner, former coach, friend, and co-host and the next model of Abercrombie and Fitch, Jake Epstein. Look good. I said this. I said this on during our little pre-meeting that you look great, and it's funny what sun and what the Hawaii sun rays do to sun.
Man, relaxation. It's snorkeling today. That was awesome.
Yeah.
So rest. It is amazing what sun and relaxation does to recharge the batteries.
Well, this is volume 2 of our free agent, whatever you want to call it. I don't know, free agent winner, whatever. But it's volume 2, and we were supposed to do a catcher today, but that one catcher we we're going to do, Buster Posey, has retired. So Ep has mentioned it before. Catchers are a little bit stiff, and this free agent class without Buster Posey is a little bit weak. So we're going to skip over the catcher position. Next week, we're doing Freddie Freeman, but today we're doing kind of a super utility type guy, and that is Javier Baez. And there's one thing that Baez has that I like, and I talked about it with Shomo a couple of weeks ago. We discussed bat tip, and she discussed how her load and how that evolved and everything else. And I suggested to her actually on the episode about the bat tip, and we've talked about it before on this show too, about how maybe a bat tip would possibly help her. Does she ever think about doing something like that? So give me the pros and cons with bat tip. We didn't get to it last week, and I want to touch on it now today because the guy we're breaking down, Javi Baez, is a huge load and a huge bat tip.
Yeah, it can go either way with players. It's a risk reward kind of move for some players because a lot of times it'll get too big, and it'll get too aggressive or it'll get too fast, and then they won't be able to control it. So, with players that are trying to maybe add some rhythm or hand movement, it's a really good way to do it. There are different players, or I'm sorry, not different players, but different ways of doing it. Like Barry Bonds had a little bit of that move, but it was more of an out move, like over home plate, where he would tip it and then bring it back in. Where we're going to see Baez really gets his back shoulder up really high. They would be called a wrap. If it were 10 to 20 years ago, they would call it a big bat wrap wrapped around his head. But we'll see where it is when his front foot plants. And that's kind of the key is, how aggressive do you get it? And then where is it when the front foot plants? Because that's where you can get in trouble.
Yeah, the guy who had the best bat tip ever was Gary Sheffield. Did you ever teach something like that? You probably wouldn't, right? Gary Sheffield bat tip or whatever you want. I don't even know if you want to call it a bat tip. It was a huge hit.
It was pretty impressive, whatever it was. Yeah. No, sometimes a hand hitch, where a player will kind of bounce their hands down with their stride. Yeah. That's a problem. It has to go with the feet. It has to go with the stride. It has to go with the rhythm. If it doesn't, then things get all kind of out of hand and they get out of sequence, and then it's really hard to kind of get back in the mold. So, I mean, can anyone do what Sheffield did?
Well, I think you have to have really strong wrists, obviously.
You'd have to.
And I wonder, what do you think his bat speed was?
No idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder I guess you could test it now, but it looked like it would be 90 miles an hour, where most big leaguers would be a mid 70s to 80. Yeah. His would be really high.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we cleared that up, and I'm sure it's going to be brought up again, bat tip, because that is something with the hands, the loading. It's always kind of fun to talk about. Another thing I wanted to bring up, I thought about this last night, and hitting coaches now are kind of settling into their positions. We're at Thanksgiving. So again, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Hope everybody enjoyed their turkey and their shitty cranberry sauce. But we're at the point of the off season where hitting coaches for major league teams, you don't really know from the outside perspective what they're doing. So can you give people a glimpse as to what major league hitting coaches are doing right now to prepare for the season? Are they working with hitters? Are they discussing possible offensive strategy with the front office? What is the role between at the end of this regular season or postseason up to spring training for a major league hitting coach?
Yeah, a lot of guys are getting jobs right now. There was a lot of shuffling this year with major league teams, and a lot of newer, really young young faces, kind of first time hitting coach guys that have gotten jobs. I know the guy for the Padres just got hired. Is it Michael Bernard? I don't know how you pronounce it, but he's 27 years old. That's a really young hitting coach. He was a guy that I think he was maybe at college. He coached at Michigan for a little bit, and he was a minor league coordinator for the Giants, I think, last year, hitting coordinator for the Giants. So a lot of new guys, a lot of young guys. Typically what they're doing is they're getting an idea of the returning players, because you have a lot of free agents, you have a lot of guys that may or may not return, and you have guys that are maybe struggling and getting ready to work. I would say they're waiting until after Thanksgiving to really start meeting with players.
Right.
But you'll start to see that come December, there is going to be probably a work stoppage. So I don't know what's going to happen in that, with that situation. But if there wasn't a work stoppage, you would see some guys, hitting coaches in December and January, start to meet with players.
Yeah.
At their hometown or at the spring training facility, and kind of start going over video and maybe figure out what guys want to accomplish in the coming years or the coming season, what they felt like they did well last year, what they need to work on. And then you'll also have meetings with front office people that say this person, maybe is too aggressive early in the count or not aggressive enough early in the count. You'll have all these analytical, kind of breakdowns and reports that tell you, what the hitters do on in a count, count by count basis against different hitters or against different pitchers.
And
it's a lot of information to sift through.
And they probably have somewhat of a voice in trying to sign free agents and giving reports, correct?
Yeah, sometimes they will. You'll have different organizations will ask different opinions. What do you think of this guy? Sometimes it won't be as obvious as that. Sometimes I'll even get reports with random players that aren't part of the organization, and it'll be like, well, that's interesting. And then it's somebody they're going to trade for, or a player to be named later, or sometimes it's a player within the organization where it's like, are there issues here? Yes. Or no, and then all of a sudden that player's gone. So you never know how organizations use all their resources, all their minions, all their hitting people, pitching people, player development people.
Well, be sure to follow us on social media at Jim Tara, at Epstein Hitting on both Twitter and Instagram. And of course, like the show, subscribe, Apple, Google, Spotify, and watch us on YouTube, the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast. And that's going to come in handy over the next however many weeks, because we are doing hitting breakdowns of top free agents offensively in Major League Baseball. And today we're doing Javier Baez. So let's kind of get right into it here. But first, let's just talk a little bit about Javier Baez, just some numbers. If people don't know who he is, you should. I'm guessing most people listening to this on a weekly basis know who Javier Baez is. But the one problem, and I said last week I'd stay away from him because he swings and misses too much. But again, if you swing and miss, okay, but it's the strikeouts. And even when he was with the Cubs and they won the World Series in 2016, I'm looking at his numbers here. He still struck out 108 times. Now, a few years ago, 2000, and actually this year, he struck out combined between two teams, the Mets and the Cubs. He struck out 184 times and walked only 28. He is uber aggressive, and I think that's okay, but you can see by the numbers and just hearing it that that's how he gets himself in trouble.
Yeah, and uber aggressive, it depends, what that leads to. Some guys are uber aggressive and they don't strike out very much. Right. They're swinging a lot, they're swinging early, but they're making a lot of contact, or they're making solid contact. Some people are uber aggressive, like an Altuve, who's going to swing at the first pitch, 70% of the time, whether it's a fastball or a breaking ball. So,
right,
having that mindset or that approach, I'm going to be aggressive, but having the ability, having the vision to be aggressive early in the count without being foolish on pitches that you can't hit, not just going up to the plate and swinging. So, he still hit. I feel like, I don't know, what was his, I don't have his stats in front of me, but what was his on base percentage?
So this year his on base percentage. Yeah, his on base percentage was .319.
Okay. Yeah.
Career low is 314. That was in 2016.
Yeah, you'd like that to be higher.
Yeah.
And he had a pretty good, I don't know if he just had a good second half once he got traded. But I know he finished pretty strong with the Mets towards the latter part of the year or so. He's got a lot of moving parts, and that, and the swing we're going to look at today is when he was with the Cubs, and I believe it was during 2020. Yeah. Because there's no fans in the background. It's a very good swing. Yeah. It's actually somewhat of a toned down swing. Yeah. His leg kick isn't quite as high. It seems more controlled. And, he's tried all kinds of stuff. They tried to do a no stride with him, and all kinds of stuff. But a guy is who he is. And you're not going to change somebody completely. I guess that's the best way to. Everybody wants to, a new hitting coach or new management. Oh, I want to make this guy into a patient on base percentage machine. That's just not going to be him. That's not his mindset. He's going to, as he stays in the league longer, you're going to see those numbers get better. Yeah. But he's going to be a power hitter that drives and runs and strikes out a decent amount of time, and he has to fit in your lineup appropriately.
Yeah. 31 home runs in 2021, 29 in 2019. I'm not counting the 8 in 2020, and then 34 in 2018. He was a back-to-back All-Star in 2018 and 19. I want to ask you, what do you think just from watching him and evaluating him, it's hard to get inside of his head, but what do you think just by watching him his actual approach is going up there at the plate?
I would just being a bystander. He's a guy that wants to do damage.
Right.
I think that's his mentality. I think he plays defense, obviously not trying to do damage on defense, but he's an aggressive defender. He's somebody that really has fun playing the game, and he likes to show off. He's flashy with the glove, and I think he wants to be flashy with the bat too, and with his rhythm and stance. And I think he's up there trying to hit balls really hard. I don't think he's a guy that's trying to flip balls the other way. I think he's trying to, hit a ball, through the wall or over the wall.
Does he guess? Is he? Well, sorry.
I'm sure
it's not a nice word. Does he? Oh, well, I don't want to say approach.
Does he have it? Does he have an approach? Does he anticipate pitches?
Anticipation. Thank you.
That I don't know, but okay. I would say yes, he does. I would say every big leaguer does in their own way.
Well, the Mets apparently today, as we record this, signed Eduardo Escobar, who's a really good second baseman, but they signed him to a 2-year deal. So, and Baez is talking to the Tigers right now as possibly signing with them. A lot of teams are in on Javier Baez, and I'll ask the main question at the end of the show if you would sign him or not. But it looks as though his time with the Mets is sort of finished. I'm not sure that was ever really. It looked on paper like it would be a good fit. I'm not sure that it was once the rubber hit the road.
Yeah, I don't know. I actually thought that there was a pretty good chance that he was going back there, just in that he had a good second half. I know Cohen likes him, or from what I read, he likes him and he likes his energy. I know there was the whole thumbs down stuff, but everybody gets over that, and players mature. I did not know they signed Escobar. So yes, after hearing something like that, that would definitely tilt the scales that Baez is probably heading somewhere else, especially if he wants to play shortstop.
I was going to ask you, what position do you think he's going to play? Is he better fit at second, or can he play short?
I don't know. I like him as a second baseman more than a shortstop, but again, I'm not a general manager or a field manager. I thought that was a good fit. He and Lindor.
I did too.
In New York. I thought that was a really good fit. So, but he may be a guy that's like, I remember, Machado wanted to be a shortstop too. He played third base and he wanted to be a shortstop, and then he ended up at third base because that's what he is. Tatis is a better, shortstop. So Baez might be that. Hey, I want to be a shortstop. And if that's the case, the Mets aren't going to sign. They're not going to pay shortstop money and have him play second base.
Right. All right. But, can I just make one counterpoint?
You can do whatever you want, Jim.
Okay. Look at you all happy today. You're all happy. You're looking good. No, good. The one counterpoint I have to that, the Mets aren't going to, or any team's not going to pay him a lot of money to play second, but Machado at third, and Baez has Machado power. Hard to argue that he doesn't, right?
Well, he's got,
That's my only counterpoint is that teams may pay a lot of money for him to play second base because they paid a lot of money, the Padres did, to have Machado play third.
Yeah, but I think Machado hits for a higher average. I could be wrong there. And he's a higher on base percentage guy.
He doesn't strike out as much.
Yeah, no, I think the whole Baez thing is what does he want to play?
Right.
You know, what would he be okay playing second base? Like Simeon, right? Like I can play short, but I'm cool playing somewhere else too if that's going to be the best fit for the team that signs me or pays me.
Yeah.
So that, you know, I don't know what Baez wants. I like him. I liked him there. I liked him as a second baseman in that lineup.
Yeah.
But again, if he wants to play shortstop, Detroit, you know, maybe that's a better fit.
Well, they're going after Correa as well. Boy, that would be a tandem, wouldn't it be? Correa at short, Baez at second. Well, we said that about Lindor and Baez. I guess it didn't really work out all that well. We didn't get any listener questions this week, but if you want, you can email us jimbopodcast21@gmail.com with your questions, or just reach out to us on social media at Jim Tara, at Epstein Hitting, Twitter and Instagram. Let's get into the swing of one Javi Baez, who has, my goodness gracious, that front shoulder, that thing really dips, doesn't it? I'm looking at I'm not even playing the video. I'm just looking at the still image of that front shoulder. Yeah,
me too. And we'll start the analysis right here of Baez as we go through. And so, Jim, I'm starting up with the side view, not the front view.
Okay.
But as we go into his load here, okay, the good part about his load is you can see as he's starting to lift his front foot, you're going to see the knob of the bat or his hand start to kind of load down and back just a little bit. Okay. They're going to kind of go together. And then he has this big move as his foot's coming down and forward of lifting his back shoulder and back elbow up. So he's super inverted with his front shoulder. Okay. And as he's doing that, the knob of the bat is actually, you know, most people say, oh, face the catcher. He's actually like above the catcher. That's how much his bat is wrapped, right? Now his front foot is technically not on the ground yet. Okay, so I have his front foot a couple inches from the ground, and that bat is super wrapped. I mean, that barrel is, you know, way over his head, where typically at launch, you kind of want the middle of the barrel is going to be right over the middle of the head. You can see he's a long way from that. So once his front heel lands, he gets the toe touch, he gets the heel plant. You can see it's in a much more normal position. So I'm going to bring him before his front foot lands, and I'm going to draw a line. And then I'm going to bring it to when his front heel lands, and you can see it gets, you know, a few degree difference there into a more normal position, where now the knob is actually, you know, probably facing the catcher's mask. That's a pretty extreme move. Like, it's an extreme move even where he is at heel plant. It's a good move. His front shoulder is down, right? What I typically tell players, especially if we're working bat drag, is, you know, we're trying to keep that right armpit open when the front foot lands. Okay, really important there. 98% of youth players, you know, when their front foot lands, their hands have already started to drop and their elbow has already started to drop towards their ribs. You can see he keeps a lot of space in there between his elbow and his rib cage, his back elbow and his rib cage. And that's what creates separation. That's what keeps his front shoulder down. That's what keeps his chest back. And then you can see his hips are open. So when you have that much stretch, you have to create it somehow. And if you take that video back, you can see how much movement he has in his shoulders with the stride. Okay, so as his stride's coming down, he's really working his, you know, his back elbow super high. It's above his head, you know. You'll see this position on the graphic on the YouTube video. But his elbow is actually above his head. You know, if I did that, I'd probably tear my shoulder in half. Okay, you got to be pretty limber to get that. And then it comes down in position. So again, the more moving parts you have, the more that can go wrong throughout the swing. So say Javi gets into a slump somewhere throughout the season, things that I would look for would be like, okay, well, how long is that process taking?
Right.
How many hundredths of a second does it take him to start his load and to plant his front heel? Okay, that would be the first thing that I look at. Okay, is that timing consistent? Is it still the same? Is it faster now? Is it slower now? One of the other things is when his front heel does plant and he's in his launch position, where's the ball in relationship to home plate? Is the ball 30 feet from home plate, 20 feet from home? Well, it's not going to be 30, but is it 12 feet? Is it 14 feet? Is it 9 feet? Is that causing him to have issues? So the more consistent we can be with our load, meaning it always takes 0.80 seconds from start to finish. If it's always the same, or within 1/100th of a second, it's consistent. And then the ball, is always, when that player is at their best, it's always at that 10-foot mark or 11-foot mark. It makes it easier. But the more moving parts you have, it's like juggling multiple objects. So if I gave you 2 balls to juggle with 2 hands, that would be pretty easy. We have a little bit of a hand load and we have our front foot going. If all of a sudden I give you 3 balls to juggle because you have a higher leg kick, well, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to juggle those 3 balls. And now all of a sudden, if we have a high leg kick and a big hand hitch, all of a sudden now it's 4 balls you're going to have to try to control, and it's going to make it more difficult. So, that's where some people can do it and some people can't. I'm not saying that he can't, because he totally can do this and that's comfortable for him, but that will make your timing, more difficult to stay consistent.
Yeah. So
then as we continue, what questions do you have? And then we'll go on to the swing. I know we just talked about timing so far.
Oh, I'll ask that later. I was going to just say, you mentioned where the ball was. He's hitting this right at his front foot, this pitch.
Yeah, he's big. And this is a great swing, by the way. This is a great swing with perfect timing. If we bring this video actually back to, where you could see it from the front, this ball is, he's not very close to the plate at all. And this ball is inner quarter of the plate. Okay. And he hits it to center field. So he definitely let this ball travel a lot more than he normally does on a pitch that would be in. Now, the catcher was not set up in. Okay. So this was obviously a mistake pitch. But as he comes through here, we know his heel plant position's good. We know his launch position's good. He's creating separation. He has no bat drag, and then the big thing is, the knob and the back elbow moving at the same rate as he gets to his short approach. So again, when he gets to his short approach, when his chest is facing his front foot, the knob of the bat is in front of the armpit. The knob of the bat is, his elbow is not in the slot yet. Okay. That's good. His hands are getting in front of his armpit. Then his elbow finally hits his rib cage once his hands get kind of out in front of his belt line, kind of towards his front thigh. Now in this position, when that, we'll call this the approach position, when the bat is equidistant to the camera. Okay. So his barrel and knob are in line with the batter's box line. The barrel is below his hands. Okay. And the more the barrel is below the hands there, typically the lower average we're going to have as a player. So players that hit for a really high average, the knob's going to be more out in front of where it is here. It'll be out in front of this elbow. And then that, because the knob's out in front more, that barrel's going to stay up longer. Okay. So those are your guys like, that hit 300 and above. They're typically going to be in that position. The barrel's not going to drop as much. Okay. And that's why they try to get him up, right? Sometimes because of that slight barrel drop. And you can see he has a pretty good vertical bat angle here. It's pretty steep. So if this pitch is coming in towards the catcher, he might create some side spin on some pitches if he was really late. But honestly, for this pitch here, he was, on plane for a pretty darn good amount of time. Okay. He was on plane, obviously right at his front toes, probably out in front another few inches. So I would say he's on plane. I'm going to try to draw some brackets here from there and probably mid back thigh. The only issue with hitting it too deep would be that vertical bat angle where he'd slice it to right field.
Yeah.
But you can see his barrel's not dumping or anything like that on this pitch.
Mhm.
His legs are great. I mean, he really has
Oh
good
yeah.
lower half.
Yeah.
You know,
Good
that
leverage,
front
right? He
knee,
gets good leverage.
great leverage. You can see his backside comes through, his back foot comes up and off the ground here, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But his front leg pushes back. You can see his front toes lift a little bit. That's usually a good sign that he's pushing through his heel and his hamstring and his glute on the left side. And then his extension position is good. You can see even after contact. So if we go to contact and go 1, 2, 3 frames after contact, his right wrist and his right arm is still under his left arm. Okay. It's one of the big things that I see with amateur players is, in fact, all of my online members better be watching this because I address this all the time with them. Is that right wrist is usually rolled over the left wrist in this position. And that's something that big leaguers don't do. They really don't. They're able to extend through without manipulating with their wrist too much, which will cause a lot of impact issues, and consistency issues. So really good swing. He's got a big follow through and hits himself in the lower back. Again, this dude is super athletic and super flexible. But the best part about Baez is if you look at his follow through, you're like, good Lord, that's a big move. You look at his stride and you're like, man, that's a big move. You look at his wrapping of the bat before his front foot lands, that's a big move. But if you just stopped him from heel plant to power V, he looks like pretty much every really good Hall of Famer, major league hitter that's ever played the game. And that's what's cool about baseball. I mean, that's what my dad talked about years ago is, mechanics happen after the front foot lands through contact. And no matter if you're Paul Molitor and you didn't stride at all, or you're Javier Baez and you have a big leg kick, most guys from heel plant to power V are pretty much identical. And that's what we do. Like that's, whether you're at the lab or you're with me online or you're with me one-on-one, that's what I'm going to drill in is, making sure your mechanics are locked in first before we start to address rhythm and timing and approach.
You mentioned the word slump earlier with Baez. What would be a slump buster for him if you were working with him to get him quicker through that down period?
Yeah, it would typically be, like I said, it would be making sure his barrel's not dropping. So that would be, we looked at that frame on video, his approach position. I'd probably look at that and see what the angle of his bat is. If it's starting to get a little bit steeper or it's dropping a little bit more than normal, that would be more of a mechanical move or a swing plane move. But more likely than not, I would go back to making sure that he's starting his timing at the right time soon enough. And most importantly, that it's taking the right amount of time. And then sometimes the timing will, be different on if you're looking, say for an off-speed pitch, your timing might be a little bit different. But if you're kind of in fastball mode, you want to compare apples to apples with guys throwing similar miles an hour. And that would be my big concern was making sure he's consistent with his timing, with his load. It probably all looks the same, but if it's taking less amount of time, if he's rushing it, that could be a problem.
Okay. What else would you do? You kind of answered it there, but what else would you do if you were his personal hitting coach? What would you work on with him?
I would definitely work on making sure that we're controlling our barrel earlier in the swing, not in the load. I wouldn't mess with any of that. Like he has to be comfortable, but I would make sure that he could control that barrel and smoke, maybe not in a game, but in batting practice, he could stay on a pitch up and away and smoke a line drive, a backspin line drive into right field. Like if you could add that to his repertoire, for me, that's going to increase his consistency of finding barrels, especially to the opposite field. And then it's also going to fly him out in front, because one of the issues that Baez and a lot of players get to is, they get too steep out in front of their front toes. He did not on this swing. That's why it was so good. And pitches that they should hit really well and pull, they top and they roll over, they hit ground balls to the pull side. So that would be that would be my job is his hitting instructor would be to how can we maximize how good and talented this player is,
Right.
And what he likes to do. Sit down, have a conversation with this player. What do you like to do with the bat? Like, what is your what are you comfortable as a hitter? Are you a guy that wants to pull balls? You want to get the bat hit out in front? You want to get deeper? What do you like to do? And then, hey, let's try to do this. If you want to shoot balls the other way, try this. How does this feel?
Right.
This will really open up right center field for you. Or this will increase your pull side power because your barrel's not going to be working up too much out in front where you're going to roll over top spin stuff. So it's taking what wonderful moves that this player has and making sure that his approach fits what he wants to do. Because it doesn't do you any good if he's trying to do damage middle in, or he's trying to get better pulling a ball without rolling over it, but all of a sudden he's letting balls get deep. Like, that's not going to work. Okay, so if you're working on hitting balls, if you want to backspin balls to the pull side without rolling over, we need to practice hitting balls out in front and making sure your barrel's in the right spot. So a lot of times players get, they're like, okay, I'm going to let balls get deep in order to not hook them. And that's just a Band-Aid. We're not fixing a problem. We're going to compound a problem by letting maybe balls get too deep.
Yeah. Yeah. There's one thing that was very noticeable too on camera. And we talked about the leverage part and the firm front side, and you can see the knees pinching together. The back foot is basically, he's up on his back toe, but he's basically almost off the ground as well with that back foot. And you can kind of tell that he's gaining a lot of ground force. I mean, I shouldn't say gaining, generating a lot of ground force in his swing. What do you think? It's tough to say. What do you think his torque angle would be? I'm very curious about that.
He's probably at close to 40 degrees.
Yeah,
he might even be more than 40 degrees. He's definitely in that upper echelon of separation where, you used to see guys like Miguel Cabrera, as big and strong and thick as he is. He created a ton of torque because his upper body stayed back so well, because his front shoulder stayed down so much. Josh Donaldson's somebody that actually works on that move. He's trying to create that separation. So he was a guy that was up above 40 degrees. We've talked about Correa being 30 or less. That separation is dynamic, though. It's not necessarily just what we look at. It's how much are they gaining? When their hips kick in, are they going from, say, 10 degrees of separation to 35 really fast? Or are they starting during their stride, are they already at 30 degrees and then all of a sudden their hips kick in and it only goes up 5 degrees to 35? So, it's the move. It's not just total separation. It's actually the creating of that separation, how fast it happens, how much it happens, and when it happens. That is the true measurable. But again, it's not the end all. Like, it's not going to make somebody a Major League Baseball player. It's a pretty natural move that's created if you keep your hands back. But if you try to overcook that move, all of a sudden what usually happens is players start to spin out, and it's not a good thing.
So, final question for super utility man Javier Baez, 2021-22 MLB free agent, offensive free agents, volume 2. Final question. If you were play Jake general manager for a second, would you go after Javier Baez?
I would, if he fit into my needs.
Okay.
I don't think every team needs to go after a Javier Baez, but if you're looking for a cornerstone player for your franchise for the next 6 or 7 years, I think he could definitely be that guy.
He's 28 years old.
Yeah, I think he's electric. I think he's polarizing. I think he's going to make players around him better because he's so passionate and he wants to win. He really does. Yes, if I needed somebody that complemented, if it was Lindor and he was a second base, he wants to play second base and he wants to play with his buddy, and I were the Mets, I probably wouldn't hesitate, trying to land that awesome player. Or if I was, Detroit. And I needed players. Like I needed to create a franchise player because we're not bringing any up. And he's going to be our shortstop for the years to come. I think I would do it. I think if you're, the Yankees, I'm not sure that would be, the right fit based on, where their payroll already is. So I think if you got money to spend, I think you're going to get value from him.
All right. So the jury's out, right?
Well, the one-man jury is.
The one-man jury.
Yeah.
F would sign him. Okay. Well, next week, I'm going to ask you the same question pretty much every week. I guess you can say that about every free agent we're going to do. But next week, we're doing Freddie Freeman, Volume 3, first baseman. He's a free agent, but he's probably going to re-sign with the Braves. But nevertheless, maybe, he's going to re-sign with the Braves, I would think, but not right away because the lockout's supposed to happen like next week, right?
Yeah, I think there'll be maybe a couple signings before lockout. What is it? December 2nd is the lockout date?
I think,
likely.
First or second, one of the two.
The first or second.
Yes,
so I think there might be a couple. I think the big guys that are signing for $300 million or so, I think those guys are going to try to get in before that stoppage starts.
Yeah. Well, Freddie Freeman next
Freddie
week.
will be fun.
That's Volume 3. And then Marcus Semien. That's an exciting one, too. Volume 4. That's coming up in a couple of weeks as well. So while Major League Baseball may be going on lockout, we will always be here for you. The Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast.
We won't let you down.
What we do.
For our listeners.
So that's next week. Wrapping up Javier Baez this week. And again, any questions, concerns, comments, criticisms, jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. What do you got coming up at the lab when you get back from vacation?
Getting ready for winter training and some of the Christmas camps. Yeah, this is a fun time in Texas because it finally shuts down a little bit. I mean, a lot of our younger players are, playing other sports, flag football and basketball, and that kind of cool stuff to keep them active. But they're still hitting with us. So players that have mechanical changes, this is like the go time for us to really get those going. And then I have my college camp for some college players and players that I know personally worked with. We're going to do that after the first of the year, January 2nd through the 4th. So that's fun for me to catch up with, the college players, girls and boys. So, Cassidy will be there, Shomo, and Finch will be there from
Bailey Hemphill.
Troy.
She'll be there.
Well, Bailey, I
know she graduated.
Coincidentally, she did graduate.
But
I don't know if I'm allowed to say this or not.
Oh, I don't know if you should say it then.
I don't know. No, I don't think it's a problem. Anyway, she was invited to try out for the U.S. national team. So Bailey's going to make pretty awesome stuff. So she's going to come out of her retirement. And we're going to go after it for a couple of days. She won't be there during that event just because she has to try out shortly thereafter. So, but I will see her. I get to see her one more time. So it's like the 10th year in a row. Yeah. We're keeping the band together. It's pretty cool.
Right. Another Epstein disciple going off to play pro ball, hopefully.
Yeah, we'll see. International.
International. But still, nevertheless, it's still
I hope
pretty doggone really good.
Cool.
That was a good
for your country.
That was a good promo, by the way. 2 weeks in a row. Stepped up your game from the lab.
I did. Yeah.
Labbcs.com. Well, that does it for us. Do you have anything else, sir, that you would like to say before you go gallivanting throughout Hawaii further?
Yeah, well, it's only one more day. So sad. You got to leave this place. My goodness. I'm a little upset JJ didn't send in a question. So I'm calling JJ out. We need a good question from him.
JJ, well, he said he's
the glue that holds us together.
He is. Well, I don't know about that.
Well, he's the glue that helps me, make fun of you because of Shawnee.
Right.
Yeah. No,
you guys are doing a great job making fun of me. It's really affecting me bad.
I got nothing else.
Nothing
else. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving and spent some time with their family. A lot better this year, I'm sure, than it was last year. Last year was tough.
Yeah,
I think on everyone and their families. So hope everybody's safe, had a great Thanksgiving, recharged a little bit, and ramping up for Christmas.
And more episodes of the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast.
You got it. Freddie Freeman will be a fun one.
Yes,
don't miss it.
That's next week. Again, Jimbo Podcast 21 for all your comments, criticisms, and whatever. All right, we're done. Talk to you next week, everybody. Bye-bye.